Hello, everybody. This is another one of my videos. Thank you to all your support. What was a one-time video became a small series. As long as these are continue to be useful for people, I will keep doing them. So today I'm going to be talking about effective consensus for staff engineers. As we know, staff engineers typically already will have a lot of influence over your immediate teams, which means when you go and try to engage and try to build a consensus, those are typically for bigger initiatives, and you are going to be engaging with more distant teams, and there are a lot of challenges with that. For building consensus, what I define as an engagement conversation, I will first explain what it is, so we can focus on my tips being useful. The first one is the objective, and we always want to have an objective. Here, the objective is not to show off, is not to advertise. The objective is simply to get support and alignment for your project. And from whom? And that is your target audience. So usually it is other staff or senior level IC or maybe technical managers that will be offering you resources or maybe needing to align with you in terms of interfaces and execution, or maybe resolve duplicate and redundancy in execution. So typically those are going to be other staff and senior level IC or SDMs who will know what they are doing and have a lot of experience. Um, the difficulty that goes specifically about staff level engagement conversation is that typically because of how distant you are, those they will have no context over the value of what you're proposing. They may have conflicting directions that have a very clear history and very legit reason. They may have competing priority that they're just trying to hit. So maybe they agree with you, but they're still not interested to contribute. And obviously, there will be sometimes not built here syndrome. There will be turf and credit concerns. Is he taking my scope? What does that mean for my promo? And all of those politic concerns. And those are difficult to address because you are more distant, means you have to escalate higher, and it's easier to build a mistrust. So the last thing is that there may be no trust about you. One thing that when people become a lead or staff or PE is that they will enjoy a lot of influence over their own organization, and they will know what you are doing, right? So they tend to be very confident. So if you're going to other people's domain and starting those conversations, you need to keep in mind that if you don't know each other yet, you need to build that trust again. And certainly, what you're used to do, telling people what to do, isn't going to work. So let us get started to my 4 tips about how to drive effective engagement at the staff level. The first one is informed disagreement, which is a very good starting point. I'll talk about that, why disagreement is a good thing to be embraced of. And then the second one is iterative alignment. It is a way to leverage groupthink, which is typically a problem for our own benefit at the cost of spending more time and more effort, which, if it gets the job done, it's going to save a lot of headache later. The third one is Spearhead Example. It's a more tactical advice tip for how do we navigate, conversations that easily goes philosophical at our level. And then the last one is really a no-brainer, but just stressing the importance of owning agendas and minutes, so to influence the outcome. So let us get started. The first topic, and this is a wall of text, but excuse me, this is informed disagreement. So the idea here is that informed disagreement, where you agree vocally and clearly and precisely after, of course, understanding and knowing what each other is saying. That is the great starting state to bootstrap conversation. Before that, you're really in a discovery phase and you want to make sure you don't kill the relationship or you don't create issue by jumping into disagreement too early. Getting to that informed state means that just qualifying what you're saying as a starting point, right? Like, this is my opinion, this is our current vision, this is the starting point. Stressing that fact as a starting point, alleviate people's concern. You're dictating or telling people what to do, asking people to hold their disagreement for now and just listen to the whole story. But also at the same time, you should be doing the same thing, right? Just getting informed, capturing the whole state. It is like in lawsuits, you are going to be disagreeing and you are going to be very heated about it, right? And it's actually adversarial in that case, but you still have a discovery phase where you do not comment yet, and you do not object, you do not disagree, you just listen to everything that the other side is saying. And in this case, you're not even trying to attack it. You're just trying to figure out the lay of the land, to know what's already in agreement, what's already set, and what is not yet in agreement, and what is the extent. So that's getting informed. And the disagreement being vocal is also extremely important. That doesn't mean you should be interrupting people and jumping in when they're talking to say, "Oh, I disagree with that." But what you should do is definitely take them down, so you can have a very organized and very precise disagreement captured. So the wall of text you are saying is what I like to see as my template for the order of discussion. What this means is we really shouldn't be talking too much about the bottom ones before the top ones are either agreed upon, or we have at least captured the extent of the disagreement, right? We have know exactly what Desmond and you, what the both of us, where do we stand. So if we're fairly close, then there's a narrow range of disagreement. If we are like nights and days completely different, then there's a broad range of disagreement. But in both cases, let us embrace the clarity that we are now taking to both understand what are the possibilities. How would this function of possibility collapse, right? For those of you who learn about quantum physics. This list also allow you to be more efficient, because you could sometimes jump ahead, right? So you could say, okay, I'm not buying if the problem needs to be resolved yet, or why is it important, but let's capture an item to work toward that. In the meanwhile, let us assume that it is, and let us go down the next topic, right? So here you're agreeing not to disagree. You're also not just saying, forcing it down the other people's brain, but you're just saying, let's pretend we agree, that let's keep going with the other conversation, right? But you will always revisit those points, and they will make, changes will make any downstream discussions moot sometime. So you don't want to be doing this kind of things too much, because then you get into a complex web of what ifs. What I like to do is I typically like to just make sure I capture what is in agreement regardless of prior disagreement, right? So if I have disagreement and then another disagreement, I don't want to have like four options or four possibilities as a basis. That's just too much, right? So let's say if we both don't agree with problem need to be solved, and we also don't agree with who's going to be solving them, then maybe I stop the conversation there and we just focus on them. But if the only thing we don't agree on is the who needs to be solving it, then we can certainly jump to the proposal, jump to the design even, especially if we actually agree on that. So this is the table. We go down this. For each of this, we capture the range and we capture any action items that's needed to get to a yes. Sometimes it's collecting info. Sometimes it's getting other people's thought. Sometimes it's engaging advisors or influencers in the space. Sometimes it's escalating. One of the very important thing is you want to point out and be very clear that people are not misrepresenting what they don't agree about. This happens a lot when people don't feel safe. So they're just gonna make up different reasons, right? So I may have a resource constraint, but what I'm gonna say is, oh yeah, I don't think this problem exists, or I don't think that plan is gonna work. Why do you do it this way instead of that way? Why do you do it decentralized? Why do you pick RESTful service over GraphQL? But really underlying, I'm just kind of delaying because I don't even agree with the whole premise. Or maybe I agree with everything you're saying, but I don't have the resource, so I'm playing some tactic. And it could be very unintentional, right? It's not malice, it's not intentionally playing a game. People tend to not be very clear about which one they're disagreeing, or they're trying to be polite. Maybe they don't think what you're doing is valuable at all, but they don't want to say that, so they may pick one, maybe the like REST versus JSON, right? And then REST with GraphQL, and then you just get hung up there, and they hope that will kill the conversation. Recognize that, tackle that, don't force agreement, but force people to be informed and insist that anything to be captured. So this is the framework of informed disagreement. It is better than apathy. I don't care. It is better than, oh yeah, it sounds great, right? But I'm not going to do anything. So until I surprise you down the road because you thought I agree, but then I don't, just by not cooperating. So it's better than all of those. So let's go for informed disagreement with this framework. The second one is iterative alignment. So this one is really more of a cadence for doing meetings, right? So we tend to have really huge meetings for cross-organizational engagement, and they are a lot of times they are very harmful because politics get in the way, too many people are there. The leaders, they are impatient, right? Leaders tend to be busy people. They want you to up level things. They want to know the result. They want to know the conclusion. But when you include them in the engagement, they may immediately be wondering about the philosophical debates, like, oh yeah, is this aligned with the future of our org, right? Like, does that, I'm just gonna assume Desmond is asking me to drop everything I'm doing, or what not. So I find that the best way to do it is not to have everybody looping everybody, with the high level leaders for the first round of engagement. But actually, at least for our own project, right? It's not coming top down to have iterative alignment. And that really means you just have your individual or triad meetings before your group meeting, and you're very precise about what they each do for you. So individual meeting is not like a two-person individual meetings. Triad meetings are great. There is a framework created by what's called the tribal leadership. I think there's a book, and it's talking about the strong stability and good transparency of triads, where three people kind of talk to each other. So that's what I use to a lot of good effect in my own career. But in those individual triads, it's really good for initial engagement and getting to know the stakeholders. We only have two of us or three of us. We're chill. We're not in a huge rush, right? We're not having like 20 people in the room or our VP there, so we are more relaxed. We're not appearing stupid or indecisive or ping-ponging. And by the way, ping-ponging and changing your mind is a good thing about a leader, right? You should always be changing your mind. Consistency is overrated. That's another topic. Um, so the other one is about gathering opinions and perspective interview for informed disagreement. So what I was talking about is a bit lengthy before, that you need to first reach an informed state where you know exactly what the other side is saying. Typically, those meetings are better with fewer people, because if you have 20 people, everybody interrupt once, then you interrupt 20 times and nothing gets done, right? Especially some of them may be high-level leaders that people are afraid to challenge and tell them to stop, right? Shut up, and let them finish. So that's one of the problem. If you are trying to convince people, you find it's better to have that one-to-one or one-to-two band. Likewise, if you're just really trying to listen to a story, it's better to have a review just with you, so you get that informed. And that also allow you to work down this fairly lengthy checklist and then capturing the information for each, which takes some time, and you certainly don't want to do it for everybody during the same meeting, unless you guys are very embracing it so much. In that case, let me know, and I'm glad I helped. Um, then what you can do is you would be scouting controversial or politically charged topics, right? So there are always going to be controversial topics. That's another thing about informed disagreement, is you know about those upfront. Maybe we're just super touchy about operational arrangement. Maybe we're super touchy about resourcing. Maybe we just have some sort of framework, maybe data ingestion, API integration that the org is trying to push. And especially there were previous failures or sort of ugly blaming, finger pointing things going on. You may not know. Maybe there is a leader who's influential, but he has some sort of pet problem. So you hit that landmine, and then you just get into that, and nobody can talk about anything else, or just piss people off. You lose credibility. So those are not desirable, but they happen. And my philosophy is, if something affects me and breaks my stuff and mess up my project, then that's for me to fix. So I use individual and triad meeting as a way to scout ahead and avoid getting hit by political charged topics in those big meetings, where maybe you only got one shot, right? And then some people is pissed off, and you never get that result you're looking for. Specific and narrow concern detailed explanation. So this sometimes people need it, right? So for example, as engineers, we even at the staff level, we need to dive deep. So maybe we're going to talk about super detailed protocol, binary, encoding, whatnot. In the meanwhile, the product manager, the VP, the director, all goes like boring. Like, why are we talking about this? So know what to not talk about, know what to take offline in those meetings, and actually even better, who to talk to before your big meeting, so you get those out of the way. So they become an ally in your big meeting, right? And those deep dive have a specific example with what I call spearhead example. That's actually one technique. So in large group meeting, what are they good for them? They are really good. They are needed, right? So they are good for demonstrating the extent of your alignments and support. So it's not about building them. You should be building them in your individual triad meetings. And if you are more efficient, you can have bigger and bigger meeting, right? Like in my own team, sometimes I have like the whole team talk to them at the same time. I already have a lot of contact and trust with them. But this kind of meeting, I like to go small rather than big. But ultimately, at the end, when I already have the support, already addressed a lot of concerns, I already captured the point of disagreement, and maybe even addressed the easier ones. Um, and at least I have reached the form of informed disagreement rather than uninformed, right? Then I will know that this is time to have a big meeting with everybody, and maybe I call that the kickoff meeting, but the project is already kicked out maybe a couple weeks ago, and everybody already talked to at least once. In this meeting, you're really kind of showing off, right? You're like, I have built up this base of alignment already, and here's the support. So people in the meeting can say, oh yeah, like all those other people have talked to Desmond too, and they're supporting it, or maybe they have reached being informed at least, and we are presenting what the remaining disagreement to cover. This is almost like you are talking to them each one by one, and then you're kind of bring them together to just let them see how big of a following you have, right? Obviously here they're not really following you; they are part of the discussion you have already engaged. The second piece is consolidating consensus, right? So the people demonstrating extent of alignment is important, but also this is a way to be in a big forum just to kind of restate and reiterate what consensus is there, and then what are the resolutions that's already been reached, and then also, of course, what are uh, known as the remaining disagreement, right? So what are known as remaining disagreement is again important because that's the first step in solving them. So important to be talking about those in big meetings. And then, of course, giving people a chance to say, actually, I want to be involved in that, or I want to revisit that. So you have some crosstalk. You're collecting action item and gaps. So in here, I mean, you should be prepared to define any challenges to things you already reached. And because you have already built allies, you have already reached informed disagreement or even agreement, your answers will ideally be backed up by other people in the room, right? That's how you get the groupthink to your advantage. But if you really hit a completely new topic or one that you don't think you can push through, then don't dwell on them in big meetings. Spend little time on them, take them offline, and then go chase them down and report back. So that's a way to not get the conversation in a bind. So what are spearhead examples? Spearhead examples is what I use to deal with what I call a level of detail paradox. As I get more and more senior, work with bigger and bigger executives, I realize that sometimes people don't understand their manager or their leader, right? They are like, oh, they don't listen to detail. They keep talking about concepts, nothing land. I think that we need to understand that's not the bad thing, right? That's how up-level conversations work, and that's why there are people working under those leaders, right? So recognizing that though, we do understand there's a paradox because high-level engagements for bigger projects involve bigger leaders, and they don't want to go into the detail a lot of the time. So what's likely to happen is everybody up level otherwise very balanced proposal, so it sounds kind of absurd, right? It's like and inadvertently creating a fallacy where you're taking your points to extreme or overly reductive vision that just looks stupid, and it maybe is stupid, but that's because you pruned out all the details at the lower level. So that's bad. You're just gonna get people just pissed off at each other or disagreeing for no good reason. The second piece is then too much detail in those meetings, those presentations are not interesting, time consuming. So really, what's the best way to get the best of both worlds is spearhead examples. So you should be creating or asking for them depending on which side of the table you are on, or maybe just help create them either way. What I would like to have is one or three super specific, super concrete examples to prove the point. Now one of them would be a simple one to show how my proposed solution works, right? And maybe the primary, most common problem it solves. It shows this solve a common or frequently happening or a existing need, right? Second one would be a complex edge case that differentiated, that shows how my solution actually comparatively is better compared to the other alternatives I considered. Maybe it only works with my solution. Maybe it works best with my solution. So in this case, maybe if I'm doing an electric car instead of a gas car, I'm going to be talking about, the environmental situation, maybe gasoline becomes expensive, right? Or maybe having an electric car allow me to be loaded with a whole bunch of equipments. So anyways, that's basically your comparative advantage. My third case is I like to have another different case, super different, to show that my solution is general enough. So typically this would be from a other if I have a number of customer, I will like pick one that's kind of like the strangest, right? Basically something that's different to answer the question. Yeah, like Desmond, you gave me two spearhead, right? So one demonstrated to me that there is a need. Another demonstrated to me that there are some capabilities, but yours is just a super specific solution, right? Why are you saying we need to build a framework around it? Why is this such a big project? So this one would demonstrate the breadth. And with the 3 point, you're making a triangle, right? And within the triangle, a lot of the time people can understand and infer and be able to mentally kind of imagine how your solution or your proposal is going to turn out within that boundary. Right? So when you are dealing with spearhead examples, you would be working with key experts and influencers to vet them, not necessarily the ultimate approvers. A lot of times executives operate by having trusted lieutenants, other staff engineer or PE in their org, right? Their PM who's related to this, and then very experienced managers who are likely to be talking to you. And then maybe those managers have their own trusted lieutenants. So figure out who those are, figure out who are the people that both welcome the detail and also have that influence, go through the spearhead example with them, right? And then be prepared to attack and defend them, right? So these examples should be fair. They should be not the one that only shows the benefit for you, but also legitimate real world cases. So people can actually try to attack them and say, oh, actually, I don't think this is the best way. What about this? Does my solution, my counter proposal also solve your spearhead use case or not, right? So have those challenge and don't get hung up on whose example, whose proposal it is. Maybe you actually learn something. Maybe you actually need to revisit certain part of your system. And if you discover that, thanks the person, give them a kudos, right? And then immediately welcome their opinion into your framework. That's what I mean by change your mind a lot is not a bad thing. In this case, if you're worried about being embarrassing, I mean, that's why you're working with one or two people at the same time, right? And as engineers, strong engineers, we understand that objective iterative process. So you're not going to look like you're indecisive or wrong in a big group. That's another reason why you do things iteratively. You show the spearhead examples in detail to influencers first. The last one is going to be quicker. So this is about agenda and minutes. Now, writing things down just makes them look more authoritative, even if you just wrote them down like 2 minutes ago and it's only you, right? So that's another people like mental fallacy, but let's use that to our advantage in two ways. One is you should always set an agenda for your engagement meetings. With your own team, sometimes I get lazy, right? Just jump in and talk. But I shouldn't actually do that. But again, busy times, lazy person, right? But with important high-profile conversations, I always have agenda about the goal, and the agenda super important because it is your best way to enforce a informed disagreement and iterative alignment. Informed disagreement is like let's be fine-grained about our disagreement, and let's also capture the range and welcome those disagreements, right? Which means not jumping and debating the details and resisting that urge and taking it personally or why doesn't this person agree, embracing that every conversation starts with no unless there's a reason for yes, yeah. And iterative alignment basically make sure you're going to have a sequence of smaller meetings, everyone with very precise agenda, and together they're going to be rectified into your overall agreement, right? So both require your agenda to be prohibiting people from talking about things that's just not relevant. So going in circles between layers, like what the example I'm given, sort of, oh, I don't agree with this, and then you kind of give a compelling argument. I'm like, sure, but I don't agree with that. You're like jumping around, right, rather than going in an organized fashion. Um, if you have incorrect or missing people in the room, right, you're talking about some sort of resourcing when all you have is a bunch of engineers who's interested in discussing solutions. Uh, Take it offline, capture it, move on, right? Prohibit the discussion from going further. Key data information, you're making a lot of assumptions, if this, if that. We had a conversation where somebody was challenging latency, right? They were like, oh yeah, this could be latency, yada, yada, and blah, blah, blah. And turns out there's just 50 milliseconds of latency in a baseline of like 6 seconds, which, by the way, not very important in that use case. But if you don't get that data, then you're just going to talk about it philosophically. And there's an argument, of course, less latency is better. Who can argue with that, right? Um, Another thing then is to capture and immediately send minutes after you're done. What was agreed in the meeting? What are the action items? And for action items, always have who's doing it, what, by when. If you don't have a when, collect it soon and push for it, right? Get a date for a date. And the who is very important. So avoid the fallacy of saying we. People like to say we are this, we have this problem, we will do this. That inevitably lead to confusion about who's doing it. Ideally, have a person. If not, have a team. But if it's a team, I would say have a person anyways, right? Maybe the manager or a lead or whoever is going to chase it down. On what was the shared understanding or this of disagreement reached, right? So let's go back to the most important framework of informed disagreement. You should always be capturing what is the extent of your shared understanding and your disagreement. It's kind of like same as my escalation to, oh, that's in Mandarin. So I may do an English version, but the escalation framework where you want to create an impartial statement of each side's position, definitely very impartial from their own perspective. And both of this side doesn't have to themselves be impartial, right? They could be representing of any bias. That's fine because you put them together side by side, you highlight the point that is being disagreed on, and then that sets up for further discussion. Definitely write that down so you don't chase against a changing target where people keep baiting and switching you on the reason that they disagree, on the point they disagree. Yeah. And the last one is any action item to resolve the remaining disagreement. So sometimes the action items are for execution. Sometimes the action items are for getting to yes. So definitely capture them. A lot of time they are talking to this person, get his buy-in, gather this data, write something down. But if there is no action item, typically you're thinking about escalating, right? Because if you fail to convince me, but I don't really have anything to say, or action item for you, I just categorically refuse, then escalate, go to my boss, let's have that bigger conversation. So yeah, this is my four technique about dealing with effective engagement and getting consensus as a staff engineer. I hope you enjoyed this talk and see you next time. Please let me know what topic you love and I can give some useful content. Bye bye.